Hello, Frisco, and we are back again with the real leaders of Frisco. And I know that in last week's session, we said that we were done for the month, but we have just one more in honor of closing out Women's History Month. And we're going to talk about a fun topic today for women. It's the power of using your voice and turning up the volume. And I have three amazing women with me who are going to share a little bit about using their voice and how they've turned up the volume in their lives to not only advance their careers, but to advance things that matter to all of us in our community. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Sunny, who's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to have some conversations after the ladies have introduced themselves.
Thanks, Angelia. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Sunitha Charvu. My family and I have lived in Frisco since 2009. We have 3 kids, one of whom graduated from high school, and I've got 2 more in high school, so we're almost there. My husband and I love serving and giving back to the community, and one of the ways to do that is on the Mayoral Ad Hoc Committee for Inclusion, and also as part of the Frisco PD Training Advisory Board.
Thank you, Sunny. Excited to have you here today.
Good evening or afternoon or whatever time you watch it.
Yes.
My name is Dr. Manigo Segbe-Hali, and I've been in Frisco for the last 16 years. I have a big family. I have a tribe. I have 4 children who are matriculating through the Frisco schools, one who's already finished. And I do a lot of community work here in Frisco through my sorority, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Delta Alpha Alpha Zeta chapter, as well as I work within the community and giving scholarships and on one of the boards of our Frisco community. I'm also, career-wise, I'm the Chief People Officer at Checkers and Rallies, and I'm very excited to be a part of the conversation today because I believe the power of your voice is something that we need to talk about as women.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I'm getting excited.
It's going to be a good conversation. So I'm Wendy McGowan Ellis, and my company Windustry is actually producing this podcast for Angelia. We kind of started this during her campaigning, and now we're continuing it on. And my entire business is the foundation and mission is to get more women's voices into the room. So this topic is right on target for me.
Y'all, this is getting ready to be fun. So sit tight, stay with us, because there's just so much that I know these women have to share that I think will be really good and exciting for everybody to hear. So I wanted to just throw out a question, and you guys can just kind of jump in at your convenience. But tell us a little bit about when you heard the topic, the power of using your voice, turn up the volume. What did you immediately think about when you heard that, hey, this is going to be something that we're going to be talking about?
Well, I was excited, Angelia, because I'm from the 4th poorest country in the world, Liberia, which is in West Africa. Mm-hmm. And even though we had one of the first women presidents in the country, women are still muted. Mm-hmm. And they still don't have a voice at the table, and they still don't have power in politics and all those type of things. And coming from a home that had a lot of domestic violence, my mom was muted all the time. So it's something that is very important to me to make sure that the power of women's voice at every single business table, at every single personal table, that it's heard and it's valued.
Oh, that's so rich. I'm interested to hear what Sunny and Wendy have to say about this, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about this whole topic of women sitting at the table.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Sunny.
You know, what hit me was the Me Too movement, how it took millions of women's voices to kind of be heard. And here we are today kind of sharing our individual stories, how we made that impact. So let's keep inspiring the future generations. Thought about how my girls and how I'm always telling them to use their voices and stand up for themselves, both as someone from, an Indian cultural background and as an American. And they're both in both of those cultures. So it resonates a lot.
I love that because I think our voices, it's our superpower as women. And if we realize the power of our voice, we could change the world. And I think we're seeing that with women in key positions throughout our country. I just, I think harnessing our power and channeling our voices towards things that actually matter are just, it's a powerful tool. And I'm excited to hear how you guys have done that. I know all of you, and to see how you have used your voice to make a change here, even in our own community of Frisco, is exciting, and I can't wait for people to hear those stories. Yeah.
So for me, the title of this episode resonates because I recently finished reading a book called Cassandra Speaks. I'm going to throw that out there for everybody watching and listening. Check it out on Amazon. And the subtitle of Cassandra Speaks is If Women Were the Storytellers, How the Human Story Would Change, or something very similar to that. And so for those of you who aren't completely familiar with your Greek and Roman history, like I wasn't, Cassandra was, I'm going to give you the brief story of why this book is titled that and how it's important to our conversation. So Cassandra was a real woman, human, but Zeus and his son Apollo fell in love with her. She was incredibly beautiful. And Zeus had given her the power to prophesy. Well, when Cassandra spurned both Zeus and Apollo, Zeus just went, okay, whatever, and went on down the road. Apollo got angry, and he grabbed her, spat in her mouth, and cursed her with the fact that no one would ever listen to her or believe her. So she had this gift of prophecy, but no one ever believed her or listened to her. And so the whole book goes on to talk about how historically it's been men, and typically for us here in the United States, it's Caucasian European men through the history that have told the stories. And so that's the history and the story that we know. Those are the voices that we've heard. And so I love how this conversation is bringing a totally different dynamic to that storytelling.
That is an incredible book. And as I've shared with Wendy earlier, I am looking forward to getting that book and just, really kind of digesting that, because that's pretty powerful. And I think that Cassandra is not the only one that has been muted. I think we have all experienced that at some point in our life, whether it's personal or in the community or professionally, where we've really had to remind ourselves to speak up and to use our voice, even in the face of microaggressions and those little sometimes unintentional things that men may do that might cause us to sit back and be silent. We've had to say, no, I have something to offer, and I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak my truth. So that brings me to the topic of, give an example of when you've had a time where you either faced a microaggression. And for those of you who are out there, microaggressions are those little things that sometimes creep up throughout our lives that challenge who we are as individuals, and for us around the table as women. And so it may be that, and I'll give my example. I know in corporate many years ago, we'd sit around our board table and have a conversation, and I'd chime in and say something, and people just kind of keep on talking as if I had never said a word. And then my male counterpart would say almost the exact same thing, maybe in a different way, but he would say the same thing, and then everybody would go, oh, did you hear what Mike just said? And you're like, dude, what did I just say? Mike is brilliant. He was smart enough to say what I said. And so those are little microaggressions when, inadvertently, sometimes unintentional, sometimes intentional, we don't always have the opportunity to have our voices heard. And so in many cases for women, and in my case, I found myself having to repeat myself in order for you to realize, oh, I just said something. So give us some examples of when you've encountered that opportunity to maybe have to turn up the volume so that people could really hear your voice.
Angelia, I was reflecting on some of the questions, and there's so many stories. But to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying on Cassandra Speaks, and making sure that men don't spit in our mouth, or whomever, right? I remember when I was working at this company, and they had never had an HR presence before. And I was sitting around a table. There were mostly men. There was one other woman besides myself, and they were talking about another woman. They began talking about her positively, about her performance. And I was like, I can't wait to meet her. And they're like, well, she's on maternity leave. She's having another baby. It's like her 5th or 6th baby. And I told her, you need to stop having babies. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, should I say something? Should I not say something? And the other woman's just kind of like, and I'm like, no, I'm going to say something. And I said, now, why would you say that? Why would you tell her how to regulate her body? And he's like, well, what I mean is, she has health problems and, it's probably not healthy for her to keep having children. I said, now, are you a medical doctor? And he's like, no, I'm just concerned about her health. And I said, well, maybe you should talk more about her welfare and that you miss her and you hope everything's okay versus telling her that she stopped procreating. I mean, I'm just like, the audacity to think that he could just say that in front of a room full of people and everyone was agreeing and nodding their heads thinking, yeah, you're right, she's having too many kids. And I felt compelled at that time to just speak up. For her, I didn't even know who she was. I had never met her.
Yes.
But, as women, sometimes we got to speak up for women.
Yes.
And those who aren't in the room.
That's right.
Yes.
I mean, who can't defend themselves.
That's right.
And, but again, I mean, I want to be really clear to everybody who's watching and listening to this that this isn't a male bashing session, that it's just, if the only lens and frame of reference that you have is your white Caucasian male experience, we understand, but you've got to change and do a 180 or a 90 or a 45 or a 52 degree shift, like something to where you have empathy for other people and try to recognize that they have a different experience than you do.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what you both have just said is, realizing the importance of having a different voice at the table, having a different perspective, it enriches you as an individual. And so if you know that, you're selling a product or you're selling a service and it's going to attract women buyers, then for Christ's sake, go out and get some women and get some input on what attracts her to that product and what does she need from you as a seller for that product, but not pulling in those voices. It leaves you in a deficit position. And I think that that's really what we're saying here is, it's about ensuring that, if you are a woman, using your voice and not being afraid to share a contrary perspective or a perspective that's different than the norm. And if you are a man, making sure that you go out and you solicit input from women, because our voices are different. We were created different. We bring different things to the table, and our voices need to be heard. Sunny, anything you want to share on that?
Absolutely. One of the first times I was in the room where it happens, early on in my career situation where we had, a small group of senior leaders making decision on a very impactful program. And afterwards, all the confidential documents had to be picked up and put away and so forth. And one of the male leaders kind of handed his over to me in a gesture that just, the inside of me was like, this isn't quite right. So I thought about it, went home, because, those microaggressions can be super small, but when it doesn't sit right, you've got to speak up. And it wasn't a confrontation, it was a conversation. So I walked up to him, set some time aside, and we had a chat. And he was very kind of shocked at himself, not realizing what could have been perceived, and again, not understanding. It wound up being a great conversation, a difficult one to have because this was well before Me Too. So people weren't having these conversations. But it wound up being a great relationship starter for us. We became closer as colleagues and worked together. And he had that awareness to go forward and be a better leader. So take those opportunities. It's not just about you speaking up just for yourself, but the impact.
Yes.
Those ripples that you make count. Your voice counts.
Yeah. That's exciting to hear. And it's interesting because, representation matters, and having diverse voices around the table matter. And I'm super excited because regardless of who wins this March 26th election, 50% of our Frisco City Council will be made up of women. And that is fantastic because that speaks volumes to the fact that we are an inclusive city. And now we will have both women and men equally represented, realizing that we all bring something very different to the table. And so I would love to hear about a situation where maybe you guys have encountered where either you were in the minority and, and I know you guys have given examples of when you had to, use courage to use your voice. But have you ever been in a situation where you've had to really fight to use your voice, that it wasn't as easy as some people might think it sounds, but you really had to maybe risk some things in order to really kind of put your voice out there?
Yeah, so I'll go first. I had this situation happen to me when I was in my early 30s. I worked at a major investment banking brokerage house, and I was the only female broker, and I was young, so the majority of these guys are in their 50s and 60s. And our branch manager, though, he was only probably 5 years older than I was at the time. So this rather shocked me, but he screamed. We're one day, it's Wednesday, I don't know, 2:00, whatever. It's just another normal day. All of a sudden he opens his door. He is screaming my name across the office, like, get your ass in here. I go down there. I'm like, what is on fire? What have I done? What have I done wrong? I get down there. He shut the door. Shut the door. I sit down. His whole problem was that I had on peep toe shoes. Now, most of the men listening to this don't know what a peep toe shoe is, so I'm going to describe it. It's a pump, it's a heel, but this tiny little sliver like this, literally like this, is cut out around between your big toe and your second toe.
Wow, that's exposure, Wendy.
He told me that I was exposing my toe cleavage. He used that word, toe cleavage.
I never heard of that before.
To the entire office, and that he was acting like I was,
naked.
Yes, like I was naked in the office, which was quite ironic because he was about to take like all of the big producers to the strip club, like at the end of the day. So he's screaming at me about my toes. So at that point, super difficult situation for me. Mm-hmm. And I was, again, younger than he was, the youngest, the only female broker in the office. And but I couldn't take it. And I said, John, that's really interesting. And I said exactly what I just said. It's really interesting since in 2.5 hours you'll be at, and I named the strip club, with all of these guys and your top clients.
Wow.
So can you explain to me how my shoes with my hosiery on is offending you and offending anybody here? Like in 3 hours, they're going to see way more than my toe.
Yeah, I mean, we have to do that though.
Yeah.
And I know that for many people, especially if you are not one who likes to have tension or feel like you're in a confrontational type situation. But we have to use our voices. And there's a phrase that says, your silence speaks so loudly that I can barely hear what you're saying. And sometimes our silence speaks so loudly. And I know that there is a time to be silent and there's a time to speak. So I am not saying that every opportunity is a time to speak, but sometimes your silence really says a lot and it may not say what you want it to say. And so the encouragement is for women to use your voice. Find those times when it's an opportunity, not an interruption. It's not contention, but it's an opportunity to educate and enlighten someone who may not have your perspective. Mm-hmm. So I love these examples. Anything anybody else wants to share before I go on to the next question on this topic?
I'll chime in because years ago worked on Wall Street and finance industry. So, women wore skirts. They were dark blue. Mm-hmm. They were of a certain length. You wore certain types of shoes. No peep toe.
No peep toe.
And my VP was, had identified me as one of those stars that he wanted to, mold and so on and so forth. I wore a pantsuit to work. And it's interesting that someone's attire can be a point of discussion.
Women's attire.
Yes.
It's never men's attire.
right.
Yes, yes. And, so these types of interactions and comments were kind of weighing on me. I decided to pursue a different career option at a different company, which was at a significant raise and different position. And boy, was he upset. He's like, this is just the dumbest thing you've ever done. I've identified you as this, that, and the other. Walk away when it isn't someplace that respects you.
Right.
Oh, I love that.
Learn to respect yourself, find your voice. You will find your place. You don't have to take it, so to speak. I mean, this was decades ago when that sort of thing happened. But it's just something to keep in mind. Believe in yourself.
I love that. I love that. I love finding your voice because I think that is so important. We have to first be authentic and know what our voices are, because my voice may not be your voice and your voice may not be her voice, but finding your voice. And that's what I want to kind of shift a little bit and talk about. How do you find your voice? How do you know what your authentic voice is? And then how do you make sure that you're true to your voice? Because I've heard people try to speak on a topic or try to present on something and it just feels off because that's not their voice.
Yep.
And so I don't want to be anybody else's voice. I don't want to come across as trying to be anybody other than who I am. So let's talk about the authenticity of your voice. How do you find that voice,
I love
Monigo?
this, Angelia, because that's one of the things I'm working with women in my company. Many times we think we have to, especially if you're in a male-driven industry, we have to be tough and rough and, we got to curse and all these type of things to be heard and bang our fist or whatever because we're emulating what we see that's gotten them to the top. Then, of course, we get, rated harder.
Yeah.
And that woman's what they call us.
Yes.
And those women really are struggling to find their voice. And I mean, I face the same thing. You got to try out a couple of different heels until you find out and go, you know what, that's not me.
Yep.
You know what, that's not me. But how I was able to is because I had strong mentors, like Angelia. She was one of my mentors when I worked at Young Brands. And those women, you admire them, you look at them, and you go, okay, I feel like that's them. But they're not saying, be me. They're saying, be you, because I'm going to be me. That's all I can be. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't adjust your style for who you're talking with, but you have to be true, have that full integrity, be authentic. And for me, it took mentors that exude that talk to me about being true and authentic to the purpose that you have in your life. And that's what helped me.
I love that. I love that.
Absolutely second that. And sometimes you don't find mentors that match who you are or maybe your ethnicity or your gender and so forth. But lean into the ones that you admire and, kind of build your own recipe of what that authentic voice is for yourself. I think that's what it is. It's not about just taking somebody's voice or emulating or pretending. It's a custom recipe you make that's your own special flavor. And I think mentors are a big key to making that happen.
I love that. So as you're talking, it reminded me of a boss that I had. It wasn't so early in my career. I think I had been in corporate for about 10 years. And, the way I speak is just the way I speak. I mean, I don't think about it. It's just kind of how I speak. And so he decided to give me some feedback and to tell me that in order to be more relatable, I had to be less formal in my communication. He said, your communication is always so buttoned up. It's very formal and it's intimidating. And so you've got to maybe, relax your language a little bit and, throw some swear words in there, but, just get people very comfortable with your language because your language is very formal. And I went back, and I wasn't so early in my career, but we all know that, when people are influential in corporate, very much like to your point, you thought, maybe I should give this guy's feedback some credence. Maybe I should figure out how to use more slang and be a lot more relaxed and less buttoned up, as he put it, in my language. And my husband, who has always been a mentor to me, he said, why would you do that? Right. Why would you try to be something that you're not? Because we all have PhDs in who we are.
That's right.
It's like now you're trying to now go become somebody that you're not and trying to learn from start when you have already perfected how you are and you're authentic to your voice. And it started me to thinking, okay, well, why do I speak the way that I speak? And a large part of it is, and many of you know my story, I grew up incredibly poor, below the poverty line, and the only way that I was able to go to college was through academics and oration competitions. And so I spoke my way out of poverty, essentially. And so what he was doing when he gave me that feedback is he was basically saying, he was undoing and undermining everything that made me me. So we've got to be so careful about allowing those voices that may mean well when they speak to you and tell you to change your voice, and in this case, to change the very way I spoke. What he was basically doing is saying, I'm not validating what got you to where you are, because oftentimes why we say the things we say and why we do the things that we do is because of the journey and the trials and the testimonies that we've had to overcome. So for me, it was, no, I'm not going to change the way I spoke, because I spoke my way out of poverty and I'm going to speak my way into success. So that was a powerful learning for me.
Good.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very interesting that he used the word, it's intimidating to you. Because my methodology of trying to help people or educate people on, exposing these microaggressions or whatever is to get very curious. Instead of being insulted or getting my defenses up, I try to go to a place of, okay, what else could be true here? What else is going on here? What made him say that word intimidating to you? And if I had been you, or if something like that happens to me, I immediately drill in on that word. Why would you say that to me, Ron? Why would you say that to me, Sam? What's intimidating about how I'm acting? Who am I intimidating? Is it really intimidating, or is it that there's something else going on here? Because what I've learned in the 50 years of my life is that people are motivated by two things. It's either a money threat or an ego threat. So you were either giving him cause for concern in that you potentially could have been going for something that he was going to be considered for, or you were going to surpass him potentially in his career. Now, I'm putting that on him. I wasn't there. I don't know the situation, but in the course of my life, that's what it's really come down to. When people start questioning you and your voice, it's something threatening their ego, or it's something threatening their money/security.
Awesome. Well, ladies, we could be here all day, because I know we have so many stories to tell about using our voice, but I want to have this final question, and this will be kind of your final thoughts. One of the reasons that we wanted to do this podcast is to be able to give women who are out there listening not only an opportunity to meet powerful women in our own backyard. We don't have to go to another state or another country to bring in powerful women. We live among them every day. That was one reason. And the second reason is I wanted women to be able to walk away with a nugget or something that they could use in their own lives to make them better, because we are all striving to be better. None of us have arrived. We're living and learning every single day. And so the final comment that I would love for each of you to make is just to give maybe one tool or tip or something that women can actually take and hold on to on this topic of using their voices and turning up the volume. So whoever wants to go, you just feel free to jump in.
Well, I'm going to use something that Wendy said. I love the Cassandra Speaks. I have to get that book.
Yes.
It's fantastic. And what keeps resonating with me is Zeus spitting in her mouth. And to me, that's an analogy of how someone tries to close up your gift.
Exactly.
And we manifest the things, the gifts, the blessings in our life through what we say.
Yes.
Because it comes from your heart, from your mind, and through your mouth.
Yes.
And so when you allow someone to shut your mouth, to spit on your gift that God has given you, you are not fulfilling your destiny. So keep your mouth open.
Yes.
And keep your mouth open, full of productive things that's not only going to fulfill the things that will make your life a blessing, but it's going to bless somebody else. I'm sure in your life there's been times when the Spirit has spoken to you and you're like, I need to tell this person this thing, but I don't know how they're going to take it. And you told them and it resonated with them because they felt like they weren't alone. And if you wouldn't have opened your mouth, you wouldn't have been able to give that person peace. So my tip is keep on talking. Use your voice however you feel like your voice will come through authentically, however you feel that person will digest it, but just keep on talking because somebody is ready to listen.
I love that. Oh, this is so powerful.
The tip I'd like to share is lots of times when opportunity comes knocking or you're considering an opportunity, as women, we check the list and look for 100% qualification on stepping up into something. Men kind of look at it like, yeah, I think I could learn that, or I might have read about that, and they step into it. Believe in yourself. Take that opportunity. Step into it. You will grow. Everybody might look like they have their acts together and are perfect and great at everything. The fact is, like Angelia said, we are all learning. We are all getting better every single day. So step into it. Don't stay back.
Yeah.
Oh, it's powerful. Powerful.
Yeah. The step into it, I'm going to keep going, taking that even further. I love how we're like continuing the conversation. Stepping into it, it's through those experiences that you learn what your voice is. If you just sit and stay and don't move and don't want anything to change, you can't develop a real voice. You can't develop a real point of view about things. And I love that, Sunitha. It's stepping into those experiences and not being afraid to take on new challenges that really helps craft and hone your voice, I believe. So my tidbit that I will leave everyone with is you are enough.
Yes.
You can do it. You are enough. Whatever it is for you. Like for everyone who's watching or listening to this, it's going to be, when I say you can do it, everybody has a different image of what that it is in their mind, but take the time to get to know yourself better. I'm going to leave with this. This is the last thing. As women, we are so busy with the children and the house and the husband and the job and the carpool and the PTA and the committee and the this and the that. I mean, take time for yourself so that you can hear your own voice. Because if you can't hear your own voice, it's hard for other people to hear it.
Yeah, I love that, because if you can't hear your own voice, you don't know how your voice sounds.
Exactly.
And you don't know how it's going to resonate with somebody. So I love that. And it kind of leads me to my final thought is, our voices are our superpowers. Use them for good and not evil.
That's right.
Use them for good and not evil. You said something earlier, Monigo, that reminded me of a scripture which says that the power of life and death is in the tongue.
All right.
And we can choose to use our words for good, or we can choose to use our words for bad and to cut people down. Be mindful of the impact of your words. And sometimes our intent may not be our impact. So being mindful of what you say and encouraging each other. I think as women, sometimes we're so quick to look at what somebody has on, or look at, their shoes, or like I have so many people tell me, like, I loved your shoes, or I love this, or I love that. And I'm thinking, I don't, when I'm with people, I don't even know what shoes they have on, or that's just not what I focus on. But my point is, we have such an amazing power to encourage each other and to use our voices to lift people up and not to tear them down. And especially among women, if we can use our voices to lift one another up, because you don't know what somebody's going through that day.
That's right.
And that comment, that one word, or that one thought may have elevated them to a place that, you had no idea that you had elevated them to. So use your voice for good and not evil. So thank you. Yeah, you guys remember that cartoon? It's like, use your power for good and not evil. Saturday morning cartoons. It takes us way back. But thank you all so much for this powerful conversation on using your voice, turning up the volume. And I know I said it last week, but this is really the last session for the month of March.
Unless you want us to keep going.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Exactly.
And I've heard so many great comments from you guys on, keeping this going. And you may have a surprise coming. We may not do something every week, but we probably will try to keep this voice going because there are so many incredible leaders in Frisco. So many voices we haven't heard, and one in particular that really has piqued my interest for the month of May. The month of May is National Law Enforcement Month, and we have some powerful women in law enforcement, y'all, right here in our own backyard, either in police or fire with public safety. So you might just stay tuned for the month of May because we may have some powerful women who carry guns for a living.
Yes.
I know, isn't that powerful? For a living.
I love that. For a living.
Yeah. So more to come on that. But thank you so much for joining us, and you guys have a great rest of your day. And thank you guys for being here.
Bye.
Bye.